Welcome to the Master Your Moment podcast. I'm Leslie, guiding you into physical, mental, and emotional wellness. Today's topic is finding connection through humor and intention.
Excited to have Heather Browne and Lisa David Olsen with us today to talk with us about communication. So, Heather, can you start with us and explain a little bit about your background and expertise in communication?
Sure, I'm happy to. I've been a psychotherapist for 27 years, and I specialize in couples and in grief and loss. There's a lot of talking that goes on with that. And I have a TEDx, and I have a book, Speaking with the Heart, with Post Hill. So lots of experience with that, and really just taking what I've learned in the 27 years and from working with a lot of people to see some of the pitfalls and to see some of the places where we really don't know how to communicate well. And so hopefully that's my forte.
Yes, I'm so excited for you to be here. And I feel like this is going to be a great connection for our Master Your Moment group, because mastering your moment is so important with having great communication skills. Lisa, would you like to explain what your expertise is in communication?
Not really. I'm kind of shy. I am the practically world famous business humorist, interactive speaker, and communicator via humor. Humor is my platform. Humor connects groups. It can attract conversations with strangers. My latest TEDx that came out gives you the question you can use to speak with almost any other human. I have yet for it to fail. So my communication skills is about getting teams connected through gentle icebreakers that don't make you freak out. And my latest book speaks to that and includes lots of tips and tools from the stage to real life communication.
For a second, because I want to share something if it's okay. So there's an interesting connection between Lisa and I and having us on the show together, because my focus is connection and compassion to cultivate communication and relationship. And then Lisa brings in the humor aspect of that. And when you tie all of those in, it opens up so many doors. It creates so many selfie moments. But there's really a beautiful awareness that she and I have that are both a little different and both really important. So this is going to be fun.
Yes,
Well
I
said.
really thought that was going to be great to have both different dynamics and different people coming together to really ignite what communication is all about. And Lisa, humor is a huge aspect of my life, mostly because my husband, he emanates humor to a T. I did this I don't know if you've ever heard of viacharacter.org, but they have like a quiz. And when you take the quiz, it tells you what your top 5 virtues are. And one of those virtues is humor. And his top one was humor. And he makes me laugh so much all the time. And that's the only thing he does with our kids too, is just like cracking up. That is definitely his communication style. So much so that I'm like, okay, sometimes we need to be having some serious moments, just sometimes. But I'm going to get like really into it already. But how can humor break down barriers in our communication?
It opens up the communication, especially, someone's asked me recently, well, how do you know you can use humor in a conversation? I work in a police department by day. I'm not going to greet someone that comes in that maybe lost their toddler or is locked out of their car. All true examples. I'm not going to be like, well, Waka, isn't this funny? It's not. Yet,
Right.
through humor and joy, you can empathize without taking it on yourself. That's a huge deal for me. I have to have my wall up to protect myself. With humor, especially if it's self-deprecating, that opens the door to share the joy, such as, oh man, I locked my keys out of my car. I just went and bought 2 new cars then, or something like that, saying, I understand you, connect and then make it silly, but still help them. And so as you talking about your husband with the kids and everything, what a trust builder. Humor really, really connects us to figure out what's funny to each other. And my favorite humor is that goes to the edge, but it's not dirty humor. I'm not a prude, but once you go dirty, then where do you go? So
I know, that's true.
I think if you just have humor that way, yes, it can connect.
And it's a
but
human
building trust. Yeah.
like, I mean, that you see that with Lisa. Immediately, I feel like, oh my God, I could share anything with this woman because she appears, and I think she really is so open and so accessible. And so humor is this wonderful way of saying I think it's a gift.
Really
I want our conversation to go well. I want to kind of lighten things up. If it doesn't land on you well, and I'll pull back, but it's a
Right.
gift. And in relationship, in connection, in communication, oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful thing. Back, such a beautiful thing in communication. So Lisa's hit just a really powerful tool, and she uses it, I think, brilliantly.
I think it's also good in a day-to-day office. You know, I do work in an office where it is a serious setting, as I said, but there are those lighthearted moments, and what a stress relief. One of my best friends is the investigator in the department, and she came back from a medical and she wasn't sure if she was exposed to something, and I'm there for that, you know, not too close, but I didn't know what she was exposed to. But you need to shake it off. You have to get the emotions reset. So, you know, I run a comedy troupe, and my saying always was, when you enter the theater, leave the backpack of crap at the door. Come in and it's brand new. Don't bring any of that in here, because this is our playground. And so, you know, having boundaries and set rules, that's something Heather can absolutely talk to. I'm not saying I don't care about your stuff, but right now it's time that we're getting ready for a show. We are here present with each other.
Yeah.
And then I'm the opposite. I'm the bring the backpack.
Yes, right.
Bring all the crap. And then what I do is I bring some of the fairy. I bring some of the magic. I cannot say every session has humor. There are some sessions where it's 100% inappropriate. Most sessions, there'll be a moment of humor. And even in my book, I have a whole chapter on play, because to me, if you're working on a relationship, play, humor, lightness, joy is as important as being able to do those tough moments. You need both.
I have my specialist degree in play therapy from Ole Miss. And so, so I use, I mean, humor is part of that play. And working with children, I'm also a school counselor at a K-12 school. And so, you know, you have to kind of use humor. And a lot of my kids, that's one of their coping mechanisms to deal with that pain and suffering, is to laugh about it. And I just stick with them right there and stay with them in their moment to laugh about it, but then also start creating and asking these questions for these deeper emotions.
Well, there's also that beautiful place of when someone makes some little joke, to laugh and then say, yeah. And then they drop down, because you're on the cusp of it. With the humor, you're on the cusp of the reality, because you're giving the lighthearted, the satirical, the farcical, the opposite of what it is, which actually opens up what it is. And if people would understand that a little bit more, so that person who's incredibly funny is actually exposing themselves quite a bit, though you think they're not, but it's, can you kind of work with them to find the way to drop it down a little bit in those places? So it's a beautiful, it's a beautiful door. It's a beautiful
I
door.
will point out the other part of humor that I'm sure, Heather, you run into all the time: humor as a deflector. Anytime I was at a therapist or even my physician, you don't have to be funny, is what I'm told. Or, you know, you can be serious for a second. And that was humor. As I grew up in an alcoholic home, and humor was always the escape, the deflector. Being a character is a whole lot more fun than being the kid who was being physically abused. So you're kind of like, you can, hey, look at this shiny thing, but don't ask me about that. So, I mean, that's something I wrote about in my first book as well.
But how unfortunate that, in my opinion, that the therapist didn't say, like, I see, Lisa, you're needing to make a joke right now. It's kind of hard to talk about these things, isn't it? Instead of, you don't have to be funny all the time. Instead of shaming you in your coping mechanism.
Yes.
Which was a beautiful coping mechanism. This is too hard. This is too scary. I have to run away. Instead of shaming you in that, saying, gosh, I feel this is hard for you. Help me know, how can I make this a little less hard? We don't have to go all the way in.
Nice.
Could we tiptoe in? And
I
you
like
might be
that.
like, nope, 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 nope. And then I'd say, oh, let me go when we can. Because I know we'll be able to soon.
So Lisa, what are some tips or strategies that you would provide somebody who wants to have more humor in their life or wants to be a little bit funnier so that they can connect with others?
Well, and not to plug my book, but my book is available on Amazon and all bookshops around you.
And I was going to say, watch her
Please, absolutely.
and her TikToks.
Thank you so much. Heather and I do have a love relationship here. I would say one way to incorporate humor is more punchlines, less headlines. So before bed, especially, don't be looking at the news and all the things. And I even said this to a newscaster recently as I was going on my media thing, except this channel. I'm like, I think looking up the bloopers for those shows, for me, it was Carol Burnett, and you can find bloopers for the Carol Burnett show online.
Yeah.
And I ended up having a comedy troupe that is much like that show. And that's what helped me growing up as an escape. I thought I lived with Carol Burnett. I mean, I pretended to it. It wasn't
right. Yeah.
I got a psychotherapist here. No, I knew I wasn't living there, yet I pretended she was my mom.
I love Carol Burnett.
I do too, but I didn't think I lived with her. Yeah. But anyway, you look up the bloopers and such joy, and you're in on that moment. That's the kind of humor that draws you in. So if you are seeking how to be funnier, look at things that make you laugh.
Right.
Read things that make you laugh. Take a class on how to add humor to your writing. Or one of my cohorts and I are putting on our first ever improvisation workshop in March. I can't wait to do that. I've taught it for years, but she and I are doing this together. So people that think, well, I don't know how to act or perform. No, that's great. You're who I want. Let's go play. It's going to be very comfortable.
Exactly. And we actually have a local comedy improv place in Tupelo, where I live close by Tupelo in Mississippi. And I have a friend that goes there and does improv, and she's like the drama teacher at the middle school there. So yeah.
Have you taken a class from her?
I haven't. I've wanted to go, but I haven't gone there yet.
I give you permission today to look her up today and figure out how to get in there. And your husband's going to be like, girl, you're so funny. You're so sexy.
Long time. But you know what part of it I think is, because I go off of this for clients a lot when they talk about self-love, and it's so hard to self-love and I go the opposite side, which I do a lot of my work, which is I say, well, let's talk about just helping you feel love toward life, toward yourself, toward your body, toward the experience, because then the self-love comes. I think it's the same thing with humor. I think when you try to be funny, I think most people aren't. Right. I think you really embody who you are. So if someone were to say to me, how can I be more funny? My thought would be, well, focus in on yourself. Focus in on those little idiosyncrasies or those little things that you think are hysterical. Because to me, what's comical is somebody enjoying their experience. My late husband used to always say to me, you just crack yourself up, don't you? And I'd be like,
yeah, I do.
And so when you're in that place of like, I'm having fun and I want to have fun with you, and like, how do I make this fun with you? To me, that is what humor really is. And it's not so much, this is Heather who's funny. It's more so, how do you rub with me? Can we do this dance together to make this playful and to make this delightful, and see if I can kind of like crack you a little bit.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like improv could be very helpful, because it's sort of like practicing and figuring out and having that kind of awareness about yourself, about what is that is funny.
One of the most humbling things to do is a stand-up comedy class. Take a stand-up comedy class. You will never feel less funny, and you will also find how hysterical just trying to do life is. It was a requirement of undergrad, and I ended up with an A. It was the hardest and the best class because we were friggin' naked, every single, and like, because no one was holding it back. And it was so humbling, but allowing yourself to just be you and let that be okay. Because the beautiful thing about humor is it's just on the side of something hard. And that's the reason for humor. We can't stay in this pain this long. We got to have a release valve. What's the best release valve? Love and humor.
And I teach a lot of self-care skills. That's what my Master Your Moment business is about self-care. And humor is really just about caring for yourself and having self-care, because you got to be able to relax and be funny.
Leslie, how does that work with what you just said? How does that work in your work with kids? How do you break that down to kids understanding that?
Like kids understanding humor and self-care?
Right. Self-care, especially.
Yeah.
That's something that we certainly need more of for
yes,
younger.
It is. Well, I usually just teach them some of my self-care habits and routines that I do, because I feel like self-care you have to do sort of on a daily basis. Because if you're not doing it on a daily basis and you're only doing it when things are not good, then you're not going to go to it as a coping mechanism, as a coping skill. So I help them with like meditation, journaling. I do like a lot of art stuff with them.
Man, I wish I had that when I was a kid. I did
I know,
not
really
understand
hot
that.
grounding.
Wow, good for
techniques
you.
and all of that. Oh gosh, that's beautiful.
Good for you. That matters. That's huge.
Yoga and meditation are starting to be brought into some of the schools. I haven't heard of it being the little guys. Hallelujah. Because starting
No
that just
kidding.
young.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's fantastic.
And a lot
They'll
of
be
times,
like begging for a timeout.
sometimes they connect with it really well, and sometimes they don't. So what I always tell people is, like, even with this humor things that y'all are talking about, like, I haven't done an improv class or done comedy class, but when you experiment with different techniques and different things, and you have to find what is going to work best for you. And so my goal is just to share as much as I can about different experiences and having different experiences, so that you can figure out what is going to work for you.
Well, you do that
especially
with
if you
languages.
go ahead. Go ahead,
You're
Heather.
doing that with the different languages too. Writing,
Right.
verbal, mind thought, body, art, music. I mean,
Yes.
you're coming at it from kinetic and sensory and hearing and sight. And I mean, how brilliant that is that you are, because kids, all of us have different ways of learning. And so many people will say, just journal.
Right. Exactly.
For some people, if it's music, that's not going to really work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that's why art and music helps. You know, when my husband and I, we share 5 sons, and during the teen years, it was the big deal was, and I don't know if this worked for you, Heather, with your kids, going for a drive. They would really open up in the car. And I think that was the distraction of, we're not sitting here looking at each other, and, you know, you have the freedom of the road to be distracted. So that's why probably music and art helps the younger to say, well, we're just going to free write. Let's start with this sentence. And that's where improv comes in, because it does teach you the yes and. That's why it would really help you with your stuff too, Leslie, is just that thought of yes and then taking an idea. All right, everybody pick up something off your desk. We're going to write something about it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Okay, not to switch gears too much, but Heather,
You're driving this ship. Drive it.
I want to mention and talk about, you know, how you focus on a lot of you called it conscious, compassionate communication. It's kind of a mouthful, but can you tell me a little bit about what that is?
So understanding comes from growing up with a paranoid schizophrenic, my mom. And so she didn't live in the reality that the rest of us lived in. And the more experiences I went through with that, the more I realized no one really does. And so a big challenge that we have, I think, in being human is, I come from my environment and my history. And then I look at you and try to converse to you through my lens, through my history, through my words, through my impressions, through my beliefs, through my thoughts, through my judgments, through my, expectations. And I'm thinking you're aligning with me. And so I'll say, like, this is blue, and you'll say yes, and we'll have totally different ideas of blue. So what I try to share with people is yours and your language, your little world has worked for you in whatever way it has to now. But Conscious communication is realizing yours is yours and somebody else's is completely different. And so what I work with couples, especially with a lot, is to get out of that fighting. You're not listening to me. You don't understand me. It's got to be my way. Gobbledygook that we do in the tit for tat tennis game.
Yeah.
And really take that time to try to hear and understand, well, what is your experience? What do you need right now? How do you view this right now? And not my beingness upon the other. And then there's a dance of, well, then how do we do these two different ways of looking and feeling together? And a lot of it is compassion, curiosity, checking in to make certain this is a good time. Where is it that we're wanting to go? Do I embrace the fact that we're both important here and we both have our own opinions, and mine's right for me and yours is right for you, and we're totally not right for each other? We would let go of the idea, and it's really hard to let go of, and I still haven't because it's so ingrained in us, but like, do you understand me? Because who the hell ever knows if we do? And make it more so, how can we walk alongside together in doing this? That's really a healthier way of communicating end of life. So my work is all about that and looking at the places where we don't do that effectively. And there's a couple of really simple tips that you can do to start a communication off completely differently. Most of us just throw something out there and hope it goes well. I've never gone to a buffet and put out my plate and just gone blah. Like here's a tea, here's a little bit of mashed potato. But in conversations, we do. I hate it when you do this, and we think it's going to go well. So I basically show people, let's have your communication be like a buffet plate. Let's be mindful, conscious, aware, careful. Let's look at everything before we step in, and then end up where we enjoy what's on our plate.
So can you give me an example of what that buffet would look like? Of you said those different techniques, but can you explain a little bit further about what that would be?
Or 100, because it's your plate. Yeah, the first thing is our relationship is more important than this topic.
But so you both have to agree that. You both have to agree that this relationship is our foundation. We want to be connected. Therefore, we want to be open to that.
Yeah. And if it's not, then it's a completely different conversation. If this is just like, if it's a boss saying, I really don't care how you think, feel, do, it's different. But I work with couples more so. So our relationship is more important than whatever we're going through if we want to be in a relationship. So we start there. And then the next piece is, what is it that you're wanting to explore, and where are you hoping that it comes out? If you have that conversation before you start the whole long process, you're going to change a lot of your conversations. If my conversation is, I want to beat you up right now because I'm really pissed off at you, but I want you to love me at the end. And I say that to you, you're going to be like, I'm not. I'm going to be pissed off and mad at you, and I'm not going to want to have sex with you tonight. So I have to look at both sides. Or if the idea is like, I want to spend $1,000 the way I want to, and your idea is, well, I want to save 90% of it and only spend 10. We need to know that before I start spending everything.
Right.
So know where you're going. That's a really important one. Is this conversation going to bless each other and the relationship? Because a lot of times we're just vomiting garbage. Are you open to the other person's opinions and thoughts? Because if you're not, it's not a conversation. It's a lecture.
Right.
And one of the most important is this a good time? So many people, like the person's walking out the door to go to work, and like, we need to talk about, like, is it time for you? This is
we need to talk. Shut the door. No, I'm running. Can people agree to disagree? Because I think we can. And my husband says, no, there's no such thing. And I'm like, but are we just going to argue about this topic forever then?
Well, let's do this right now. Lisa, what's your favorite ice cream?
I'm lactose intolerant, so it would have to be like a cashew-based cookie dough.
And is that your favorite?
My favorite? No. I would
not mine either.
I would like peanut butter and chocolate. Yeah.
Baskin Robbins Rocky Road with almonds.
Ooh. You're both wrong. You both are wrong.
We all disagree. The key is, this is what I believe for me, and this is right for me. I'll give you a simple example. I love broccoli. My late husband hated it. I made it every possible way. No matter what I did, broccoli was disgusting to him. Everywhere I made it, it was delicious to me. And one day I realized broccoli isn't disgusting. Broccoli isn't delicious. It's broccoli. And it's our taste.
Exactly.
That's your next book. Broccoli is your next book.
I wanted to say, I wanted to play along with that. Like, don't put broccoli on my pizza, but they wanted something that was more like, people are going to be thinking it's a pizza book then. So, but it's in my book.
I love that. But that's seriously right. I love that.
Now we do it better with food, color, car. It's okay for you to choose the type of car you want. It's okay for you to choose pants or skirt. But when it comes to an opinion about something about ourselves, we take it off and we make it all personal.
Wow. Excellent. That is really helpful.
We don't have to.
You're right.
I think sometimes there's like, it's your truth, and it's not somebody else's truth. And so you have to like think about, this is my truth. This is your truth. And then that's when you're saying, that's okay.
Yeah, that comes out better than when I say you're wrong again. I like the way you say that. I should write that down probably. I mean, it's only my third husband. So.
Okay, so here's a nugget. But you have to promise me if you do this that you'll listen to one piece that's like so important. When your person says to you, you're wrong, in your head, but it has to be in your head, because if you say it out loud, you're going to go into a total battle for you or to you. You're wrong, according to you.
That's nice.
Those pants are horrible on you, according to you, because then it takes it away from our brain thinking it's a fact, a truth, a judgment, and it makes it an opinion. But everything's an opinion.
Oh, that is such a helpful thought for me to take
really
to work, especially to work, because hubby and I don't fight really that much, but at work, oh yeah, it's all ego. So that's helpful.
It is. Okay, so you are both experienced speakers and authors. How do you think communication through storytelling, because y'all have both, even in your discussions on this, you're telling me stories about communication. How do you think storytelling has helped you connect with others?
Both of us have done TEDx talks. So I want to mention that to your audience. If anyone's interested in what a TEDx experience is like, they should Google what it is. It's a very quick talk. You have very few minutes to get your point out. That is your message that only you can tell to the world. That's a big dang deal. And being accepted out of hundreds and hundreds of people and all the training that goes into it is huge. So I'm really honored to be alongside Heather, a fellow TEDx speaker. And speaking about, ask your question again, because I just got off on my tangent on TEDx.
That's okay. How do you think communication through storytelling has helped you connect with others?
For myself, I never use PowerPoint when I'm out and speaking. And that's another reason I call myself the interactive speaker, being an improv artist. And I also invented a deck of cards that is all prompts. So we play this wherever I go. It's a choice of 2 ideas on each card. People use these to evoke storytelling or charades or writing prompts. And I was really thrilled that there were so many ways to play something that's been in my head for a couple of years. The reason I share that is I can show you on a slide the stats and the data, and so can Heather easily. But Heather gave us buffets, ice cream, and broccoli choices. That I can align with, and I will remember the ice cream analogy for sure. But if she tells me 82% of people know that your husband's always wrong, I'd remember that too. But we don't remember things on slides.
Right.
But we do retain story because it's so relatable and it goes back to cave days. Think about that. The first memes were the drawings on the cave walls. This is how, story doesn't always have to be humorous, but it generally is relatable, or the best speakers start with a story. So there I was at the bus stop and the man pulled out a knife. Well, maybe he was about to eat an apple, but I just pulled you in to story.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's great.
And that came out of the reality with my mom.
Yeah.
Like the story she was telling didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I needed to listen to try to have some awareness of where she might be. And so I think in that, it opened up fantasy for me completely, but it also opened up the importance of listening to another person's story. And what I find, I'm not going to put a judgment on it. What has become apparent in all these years that I've been a therapist is that's what people always say about me. Like, I love the way you use metaphor. I always remember your analogies.
Right.
You're people will always say to me, you're like a natural storyteller. And it's just part of who I am. But the TEDx journey, that's what I saw. Because we had people that came sharing their hearts and their truths. And then we had people who came sharing their brilliance and their data. And every single TEDx by the end was storytelling. And the coaches just kept saying, I'm bored. Or I'd be like, you've lost me. There's 15 different diagrams and I'm supposed to remember 5%. Which one is this? And you got lost. And the ones that just say, you know, I walked up on the man on the street corner and he pulled out a knife.
Right.
I'm hooked.
Yes. So something that's going to be relatable, but also, like, I would say, just from what you're talking, that using like metaphors or analogies into your storytelling can help you create that kind of connection, and using like just simple language and from one step to another step to another step, this is how the process happened, that can help you become more connected because they can see themselves doing those actions, right?
And I think a lot of it's natural to who you are. Because if I try to relate to someone and say like, okay, so I'm going to say it like this because they'll get it, unless I have a really good idea of who they are, I might really miss the mark. It's been interesting. My TEDx just went up 2 days ago. And so it's been interesting from the day that we're recording this. And so it's been interesting to look at the comments that I have, because people are saying all different things. And I'm like, like one woman reached out to me and she said, you just gave me permission to create this program that I've been wanting to create. And I just needed to know that people need to be connected to. And I'm like, phenomenal.
And Heather, that represents hundreds. That's one person that
Right.
told you, but that represents hundreds.
Well, I hope.
I know it does. That's awesome.
I know. Well, when I watched it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the kind of person that I want to be able to speak, because you have this like very soft, soothing voice and you pause when you speak. So everything that you say, and understand, like, that is something important. And she is being very intentional with her words. And I'm like, that's exactly how I want to be. So I just thought it was absolutely amazing.
Thank you. You get a lot of help. Lisa listened to me numerous times. It's a long process. Mine was 5 months, but there's a lot of crafting the talk. Well, having the idea, Lisa helped me with that completely. Crafting the talk, getting it down so it's really solid and good. And then there's a ton of practice, because I wing it. Like, I wing it all the time, and I'm really comfortable with that. But saying, let me present to you this is not my normal. So to be able to get to the place where it didn't feel really stilted took a lot of work, to then have it not be work and have it to be a love. But once again, it's really giving yourself permission to trust your gut, because you have your own rhythm. You have your own vocalization. It's got to align with your feelings and your tempo. And when you do that, then people can walk with you. It's funny because I was very intentional with my voice, because my coach said, you're so strong, you're so compelling, you could be so masculine energy. I really want you to be bringing feminine. And I'm like, okay. So it was a soft, soothing. And my son, who I adore to the end of the world, he goes, Mom, I loved everything about it, but you used that therapy voice thing. And I'm like, dude, that was intentional. And he goes, I wanted you just to talk it totally as mom. And I'm like, that wasn't the point. The point was for it to comfort, to soothe.
Right.
Me standing up and saying, you know, so my mom killed herself when I was 12 is very different than when I was 12. So it's using who you are and how you are. And then once again, thinking about what's the outcome. What are you trying to convey? I was trying to convey compassion as a love letter.
Right.
And let me help you in your story of writing this.
Yeah.
Watch what he says, you'll see the same thing. She did the exact same thing. She knew how she wanted to bless and ignite, maybe incite her audience and get them thinking and moving and being willing and risking and having fun with it more so. So her talk does that in the way like, there's moments where there's pauses. There's moments where she's cracking a joke. There's moments where there is self-deprecating. There's moments where it's open-ended. So I don't know. I love TEDx's. I think it's a wonderful experience to do.
Empathy and understanding are huge components of connection, right? And that's what you were saying through all of this and through your story, through TEDx. How can you create a story that shows that you're being empathetic and understanding of another person?
By trying to connect to the person you're speaking to. Because you give it. So it's taking that moment and saying, you're important to me. Would you share with me a little bit more? I can say, I'll do this for you right now. I can say, I'm really empathetic. I'm really caring. What you say matters to me. or I can say, would you share? Completely different. So it's not so much showing we're empathetic. It's being in the energy of being empathetic. Same thing with love. It's not like, I'm going to show I love you. It's, I'm going to love you. And then there's freedom for it to come out anyway. Like if I say, I'm going to be funny, I'm going to make you laugh, like, but if I just be me, there's a better chance it's going to happen. So to me, everything is about letting ourselves embody who we really are, and then help ourselves with those places that we know we could refine some of those places a little bit to support ourselves more so, or others.
Yeah. So I'm noticing it's about your tone of voice, and it's not always about exactly the words that you say, but how you say them, and pausing between and giving space and time for someone to process it and to think about it. Right.
There's absolutely. And my experience is, my hope is that I can reach people, whether they're English speaking, whether they're hearing, whether they're blind or not. And so if I made it all, you're going to see it in the way I look, well, then what about the person who's blind? Or you're going to understand it in my words. Well, what about the person who, has some learning disability? So to me, it's who I am. There's a saying that says, your face is the only Bible that some people will ever see. And whether you're of a particular faith or not, there's a beautiful message in that. Like, who you are in this world is how people will see you, feel you, and think about you. And so to me, the more we can encompass that in all ways, the more of a blessing we are to other people.
Yeah. And that's like coming from a place of love. That's how I feel about it. Like if you embody what it means to love and to be loved and to feel love and to love others, then you're going to be able to have that.
Same thing with humor.
Yeah.
Same thing with any of the beautiful qualities. Yeah.
Well, I also noticed that, you had mentioned too, that you focus on grief and loss. And actually, personally, during this last year, I've lost 3 loved ones that were really close. So I've experienced a lot of loss in trying to even navigate and create a business, and then, do all this, and then having that loss. And because loss is so humanistic, like everyone is going to experience loss in their lifetime. How can you best communicate to yourself during that time?
That's a huge one. As much as possible from a place of grace and compassion and tenderness. Lots of holding of yourself and letting yourself know that you've got to grieve, and you are the only one who knows how you need to. And people are going to tell you, it should be like this, or it must be like this. And it doesn't need to be. It's what you need. It's a very important time to let yourself really walk through how differently life feels without that 1, 2, and 3. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Losses that you're experiencing, because each one's different.
Exactly.
And each relationship is different. And then you also know this so rightly that when they're layered, it becomes even harder, because it's not just the loss of that one. Now it's like, I'm already in a place of grieving, and now yet there's another. And so it starts to feel possibly all consuming. And so it's a place to really make certain that you are supportive of yourself in the way that that is to be. And that might be being around a lot of people. It might be really being alone. It might be a little bit of all, but I would make certain you're taking time to ask yourself, like, how am I helping myself with this? What is really best for me right now? Do I have support in the ways that I want support?
Right.
It's brutal when they happen all together.
Yeah,
I'm also going to speak into something that you already know. When that happens, though, I believe is not just accidental. I think there's something about, and so know you won't quite know the answers of that or the direction of that yet, because it's still really ripe and painful.
Right.
It will start to be so. I think like 3 widows younger than the age of 65 before my husband died. I've been a therapist for, at that point, I don't even know, like, 20 years, something like that. And then from the time he died, though I'm getting older, so it's more common, but from the time he died, I think I've probably had about 50. And I have not added like grief therapists or us to my website.
Right.
People will feel it within you. People will know you have an awareness, and it will absolutely be a place, if you want it to be, where you're supporting others, growing with others, creating books, creating podcasts, creating TEDx's. Because when we have a place that we've walked through something that's painful, it's what Lisa's doing in all of her talks, in all of her books. She's expressing what she has been through in a way to bless others in the way that she's so gifted and talented in doing. And I think that's why we're all here, to help each other with doing life and supporting each other along the way, and hopefully laughing.
Yeah.
Really
so Lisa, how would you use humor when someone is going through grief?
I think I use it again as a deflection and a relief, because when you laugh and have humor and joy, you release endorphins, you lower your blood pressure, you are having that burst of nature's serotonin. It's all legal and free and all the good things. So it's not unusual for me to laugh at a funeral, as crazy as that sounds. And if anybody ever saw Mary Tyler Moore at the clown's funeral, then you get the giggles sometimes in the wrong spots. And I remember absolutely cracking up at my stepdad's funeral. And I was very close to him, and it was not against him. And he would have been laughing right alongside me. He probably was. And my sibling and I just got the giggles because it was so inappropriate, and we went with it. And I never regretted that, because some people might be sobbing and some might release in a different way. It's a release, and there's no right or wrong. So we need to not judge each other. And that statement goes for so many things, whether you wear a mask in public, whether you don't want to go to a social event, leave people alone, give them grace. But however we want to expel it. I'm not saying I'm always laughing. I certainly need my downtime. I was invited out today, as a matter of fact, not feeling it. And I know this about me. So I decided to alone and a little more quiet today, and feed myself and do the self-care, like Heather said. And Leslie, like you said, you're teaching kids. I see that, you're saying it for kids, making sure, are you doing it for you? Because, and you don't have to answer. I'm just saying, how funny that we will use our talents on others and forget, oh, am I practicing what I preach?
Exactly.
There's a study, and I won't remember the name of it, but where they've looked at emotions in people's faces. And if you look at someone in grief and you look at somebody in hysterical laughter, the difference is the eye direction. That's
Yeah.
it. They're so close. It's like fear and excitement, anticipation right next to each other. Grief and laughter are right next to each other.
Probably sex too.
Oh, I hope so. I haven't had any of that for a really long time though. I spoke at my husband's funeral because I really needed to give a tribute to him. And I was mindful to bring in humor.
Yes.
I had to with my husband.
And that was a relief for people as well.
100%. And then you breathe for a second again, you get back into your body and then you go, oh, but it lessened some of that tension just a little bit. And I needed that too. So what I would ask, Leslie, is for you, where's the place where you're feeling humor right now would really honor the I'm thinking they're people, but you didn't say that they were three important.
They are people.
Okay. It could
One,
be
one was a guy that basically he was the manager of our business. Like I'm a school counselor, and then I also work in private practice at a business that my parents own. And so this guy was like the manager. He ran our business, basically connected with every kid, every parent, organized all of it. And he had a heart attack, which we thought was like a seizure at the time, but it ended up being a heart attack, and died in March. And then 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law passed away. And my kids were extremely close to them. I was extremely close to her as well. She died of pneumonia, and we weren't, it was a little sudden. She had been in the hospital for like 10 days back in February. We thought she was sort of on the mend, but she didn't give herself a lot of self-care, and she didn't take care of herself and her body and that kind of thing. So that's one more layer to why I try to do this, and actually you were talking about even how I have had humor in it. And I, like, just like you spoke at your, it was your late husband, correct? I spoke at my mother-in-law's funeral because she didn't have a lot of people in her life. And she stayed very much to herself in her last years of retirement. And so I felt like I'm related to her, but by marriage. So I said, well, I'm going to write her eulogy. And I stood up and said her eulogy at the funeral. And what's funny is this reminded me, when you're talking about humor, I spoke about how she made these mashed potatoes that turned out to be like glue. We laughed so much about that. And so just telling different stories about her and her experience, and bringing humor into even just her funeral.
What a great story too, because that she was laughing about it back in the day. She made fun of it, so it was okay.
Yes.
And everybody else could think about their food story as well. So right there with the storytelling, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Always my favorite part, I guess, to say a favorite part of a funeral.
Well, that's always food, but
yeah, there you go. But that's always my favorite parts, hearing the stories and once again, you're going to see psychotherapists, but hearing the stories about how was that person in somebody else's life. I remember going to my godmother's funeral, who I just adored, and hearing people who knew her from like the business world, because she was very successful. And I listened. I'm like, well, yeah, I can see Aunt Dottie being like that. But like, I knew this Aunt Dottie. And I remember the same thing at my dad's funeral, hearing these stories that were so different than the way I experienced my dad. And then people were so touched by what I shared about my father. So I'm just going to say, because a lot of this, I think the universe works in these ways. You've brought up storytelling, you've brought up connection, you've brought up compassion, you've brought up humor, you've brought up loss. All of these things, there's probably a place to share, or there's maybe some longing within you. Like, how do we help people's stories live on? How do we help people connect with parts of who they are or parts of other people that are in their life that are important to them. And I mean, that's what a podcast is.
Exactly. That's why I was so passionate about starting one. It's because I wanted to get to know people in different fields and expertise, to be able to share their lives and figure out how other people can be connected to them. And it just creates this huge love circle, I feel, of like the universe.
A love circle. I like that.
Yeah. You're already doing it. How beautiful that is. Just now starting in the process of it, but you already know what you're doing and why you're doing it and the things that you want to pull in. So my goodness, what a beautiful journey you've created for yourself and for Lisa and I and for your listeners and for everybody else.
Yes, I appreciate it so much. We are getting close to our time to be finished, but I appreciate you summing it up. I was going to ask you to sum up what your takeaways are and what your experiences are from our conversation. What are some things that you would want our listeners to be able to take away from our conversation? Just one or two things that you've each spoken from.
I think learning that there's a benefit to speaking with people you haven't spoken to before. You had the intuitive idea to reach out to people that you met us through online, and you put together some people you probably didn't know that Heather and I are gonna hug in person someday and love each other. But the balance that you chose here, I think, really speaks well to your intuition of knowing how to get a valid conversation that is going to help other people. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lisa.
The ballsiness about you, because like when you suggested, I went, okay. But trust that, like your intuition, your instinct is really beautiful and really good. And you want to care and respect and reach and help other people in their healing journey, and how beautiful that is. So I would say, honor your feelings, honor your experience, and then just look at how are you taking care of yourself in that process? Because we can get dark and deep and painful and self-destructive. And we can also be caring, compassionate, loving, supportive of ourselves and of others. So that would be mine.
Thank you so much for coming on.